Just working through. Good. Go ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone. In consideration of the current COVID-19 provincial and public health orders prohibiting public gatherings of more than 5 people, as well as the requirements for physical distancing between persons, in-person attendance at this special council meeting will not be permitted. Members of the public can access a copy of the agenda, as well as the draft minutes from the Town of Shelburne website, or watch the council meeting video from the town's YouTube channel. Correspondence related to agenda business may be submitted via email to the clerk at jwilloughby@shelburne.ca. This document can also be made available in other accessible formats and with communication supports as soon as practicable and upon request. So with that, I will call the special meeting to order, and I'll ask the clerk to do a quick roll call of council members just to make sure that everybody's systems are operating properly.
Okay, when I call your name, please indicate present. Mayor Mills.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Anderson.
Present.
Councillor Bernardo.
Present.
Councillor Buffett.
Present.
Councillor Fegan.
Present.
Councillor Hall.
Present.
And Councillor Wegner is absent tonight.
Okay, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest by any member? If you do have one that arises, just ask that you make that declaration verbally, and then at some point after the meeting, file a written declaration with the clerk. So moving on to the special council meeting regular agenda, the first item are the minutes from the regular council meeting held March the 9th, as well as the minutes from the special council meetings held April 6th and 20th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as circulated?
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Are there any discussion on any of those minutes? All in favor?
Yay. Aye.
Any opposed?
Yay.
Okay, that motion's carried. Second item is an information package from Hemson Consulting regarding the development charges bylaw. So Craig Binning from Hemson Consulting is joining us this evening. So I think you're going to lead the presentation, Craig, and then if there are any questions, both Craig and Steve Weaver are available and on the line to answer those. So Craig, if you want to walk us through the report.
Yes, I'd be pleased to. We just have a slide deck. Sorry, I'm just, is it going up on the, great. What we just want to do is, moving to the first page of the topics, is just provide council with an update on what has transpired since we held the public meeting, and we did receive a number of submissions. And just to overview what it is that we're proposing to bring forward with the bylaws with you this evening. We can switch to, so I'll just go right on to the next slide, please. So just as you're aware, we have bylaws 19-2020, 20-2020, and 21-2020 being brought forward for consideration. They deal with the townwide municipal development charges bylaw and then the 2 area specific bylaws. We held a public meeting as required back on April 20th. The bylaws have been available since the 6th of April, and the background studies were released on the 12th of March and have been available for just over 2 months, or just about 2 months. All of that has been done in accordance with the development charge legislation. So then just moving on to the next slide. As council has been provided, and there were a number of submissions received, and they are listed here on the slide. There's been 6 of them in total, and we've provided with you our responses that we've given to those who've made the submissions. There has been a subsequent submission by the Fieldgate development community, which I believe council also has. And as we've indicated in the attached, with the exception of the Fieldgate submission, we do not propose to make any changes to the bylaws, with the exception of the East Area specific DC that we'll get into in a moment. So just moving forward in the presentation. So as I indicated, there's been no changes proposed to be made to the townwide development charge bylaw or the school road development charges as in accordance with the rates that were presented at the public meeting. We have had some dialogue and reviewed the submissions by Fieldgate to review the East area specific development charges. And as a result of those dialogue and communications with them, we have determined that some of the costs that we had originally included for recovery through the area specific development charges were more appropriately being to be funded through what we refer to as local service costs. Those are costs that the developers and landowners will pay directly through their subdivision agreements or site plan agreements. And so they don't require funding from development charges, nor are they funded from the town directly. We have also then reviewed some other cost components subject to discussions and internal review. And Steve Weaver may want to augment a little bit on that discussion. And we recognize that there's potentially some other recovery mechanisms. There's some reserves that we might be able to use, and also potentially recoverable from future development charge studies and updates. We have not assumed, nor are we suggesting that any of those costs would be funded from property tax or utility rate sources, but that there will be potentially other revenue sources that we can use to mitigate some of those costs. The result of those adjustments has been a reduction in the East area development charge calculated rates by about 27% from those presented at the public meeting. The Fieldgate representatives did provide a further submission asking for further adjustments to things. We have reviewed those together with municipal staff and Steve Weaver, and we have determined that we think what has been included is appropriate and reasonable. There may be some minor adjustments, but they can be accommodated through the DC credit agreements. Fieldgate was requesting some rather other substantial shifts in the costs away from recoveries through the area specific DC, and it is our opinion that those is properly set out in the rates that we presented on the next slides. So just moving forward, you can see here the newly calculated rates. We've called those East area road improvements, dated April the 30th. The rate for a single detached unit would be $9,126. And importantly, the non-residential rate would be approximately $47.93 per square meter of gross floor area. Those are about 27% lower than what we shared with you at the public meeting. And you can see, for example, the non-residential charge that we showed at the public meeting was some $65.80. So a reduction of almost $18 a square meter. We've also added a note at the bottom just to indicate that the current non-residential charge in this area, specific area, is $44.08 a square meter. So we're looking at about a 9% increase over the current charges. And then just going on to the next slide. And just some overall comments about the bylaws that you are considering. As we've discussed numerous times, because of changes to the development charges legislation and the introduction of the potentially the new community benefits charges, there was some ambiguity around the treatment of some services, namely library, park development, indoor recreation, and parking. According to the provisions of the provincial legislation, we are allowed to continue to keep the charges for those services at the way in which they are under the current bylaw, bylaw 31/2015. The intention then is just to leave those as they are. And once the legislation is finalized with respect to the treatment of those services, we will move forward later this year to bring council further adjustments to those rates and also potentially the introduction of a community benefits charge. And we've reflected that language within the bylaws that you're considering tonight to allow those charges to continue as they are currently laid out in bylaw 31/2015. We've also provided for a contingency schedule that in the event that the way in which police services are provided for in the town changes at some point in time, the rates will automatically be adjusted downwards for police services to reflect the nature of any future contract under OPP or alternatives in service delivery. And just moving on. Is that the end? Yes, I believe that's the end of the presentation then.
Okay, are there any questions for Craig or Steve?
Your Worship, I have a question. For either Craig or for Steve, when you're talking about other ways of collecting monies, be a little more, like I'm trying to understand what you mean by that. When you reduced it by 27%, you said there were other ways we could collect the monies besides what, grants are iffy these days. And I'm just wondering, what other ways are you more or less pointing us towards?
Yes, Mayor, through you, I'd be pleased to initiate that, and Steve may jump in to provide additional commentary. Part of it relates to shares of the costs that are local service in nature, and they've been held out, and they will be funded directly through our existing commitments under development agreements or future agreements, and so they will be funded directly by the developers. There's also a small amount of money for which the town has a security for a share of those works, and we've applied that. Then there's some other costs there that we think is reasonable to say may either be part of a future development charge recovery for growth beyond the current planning horizon of 2029, either through one of the area specific, through the area specific bylaw, or through the townwide benefit, as one of the intersections improvements may provide some benefit beyond just the local needs arising from the development within the east area. And so we have the ability to recover that money through future development charge calculations, and that will primarily be the focus. However, there is some expectation that there may be the opportunity to recover monies from other levels of government given the nature of the road and the location. Steve, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to elaborate on that, on those comments.
Yeah, we thought really carefully about that because the two main roads in the east study area obviously are not town roads. They are county and MTO assets. So the purpose of having development charges at the town level for that area and doing it area specifically is really to make sure that the town is really making sure the costs of upgrading those roads and making improvements is shared amongst the developments in the area, and not borne just by one developer who happens to come through the door first and has to make all the improvements at their own cost. That's kind of the way that MTO and the county have been operating. The county doesn't have anything in its DC for the Shelburne East area improvements. And MTO is always operated on a model that, developer-driven improvements, whoever is the developer, however big or small or whatever development it may be, if they're the driver for some improvements to their highway, they're responsible for the cost. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we're being fair, obviously to Fieldgate as the largest developer, but also to the East area as a whole, by recognizing that these are county and MTO assets, and some of the improvements identified will in fact replace some portions of existing infrastructure. For example, the existing intersection of Highway 89 and County Road 124, if all of those traffic signal heads and those light poles and other utilities are replaced by reconfiguring that intersection in the fullness of time, we would put some pressure on MTO to contribute to that, because that's going to renew their asset. Leaving it to MTO on their own would mean it won't happen for many, many years until they have other reasons to do it. But doing it, without any compensation or kind of, contribution from MTO is unfair. So we're not at a point yet where we know the timing of that intersection and how soon it will be significantly upgraded, but we do know it has to be upgraded quite comprehensively within the time horizons of the build out of the East area. So we wanted to make sure that we recognize that there are some asset replacement and other parties that should be at the table to contribute to that.
So if I can interject, 124, should we be also pressuring the county for some funding as well on their asset, not just MTO?
Yeah, for the most part, the county road improvements that will be made in the near future, so with the Fieldgate development, are really only to serve as access to their development. So we've been clear since the beginning when development was proposed on that site, even going back to the previous owner, that the only reason we would have an intersection on the east side of County Road 124 north of 89 is for that development. It doesn't really serve any other development area. So that, under the draft plan conditions for the Fieldgate development, that intersection is their cost. Now, as you build a new intersection and you look at the section of County Road between 89 and that intersection, there are some longer term improvements that are needed: widening, turning lane extensions, raised center median. And we looked at that as both a requirement for the development of the area, but also having longer term benefit for traffic generally. So there is a cost share of that we've removed from the DC, and we've done that as well for the industrial road realignment. In that case, the realignment of industrial road would probably never happen if not for this new intersection going in. In fact, we can say pretty much without a doubt that would never happen. You have offsetting intersections with the introduction of the new intersection, which has been identified since we did the Shelburne East Area study as not an ideal situation, with the two offsetting intersections coming to a T at 124. So the preferred solution is eventually to have that industrial road realignment completed to bring in the fourth leg of the intersection. But again, we don't know the timing of that. And, there would need to be, it would likely need to be done as part of some other infrastructural renewal in that industrial area, such as storm sewer or sanitary sewer replacements or other work.
So again, Steve, if I can sort of push a little bit further, when you're talking about improvements to the county, it's not just to the north, it would also be County Road 11 going to the south. Am I correct in that thought process?
Yes.
And that's why I was asking if we should be pushing the county a little bit for some additional, not just MTO, but the county as well for some funding.
Yeah, and we definitely will. And that's why we've reduced the cost of the intersection in terms of the DC apportionment, because part of that intersection is the county roads coming into it. So we would look to not only MTO, but the county to be contributors towards that, both County Roads 124 and 11 when we discuss that with the county. And certainly participating when the county updates its DC to say, you should have a portion in there as part of the county-wide review to make sure you're planning for the future needs of your roadways in Shelburne. So that's where we would try to make up those other parts that we've reduced the charge by in the town's bylaw, is by approaching both MTO and the county to assist with those improvements.
Thank you.
Craig or Steve, I mean, either one of you may want to comment on this, but with respect to the remaining concerns expressed by Fieldgate, Craig, you had mentioned that some of these, can appropriately be addressed through the DC credit agreement. So I was just wondering if you could maybe elaborate on that just slightly to explain how that might work and what that might look like.
Yes, there's some minor comments that they made in the letter and through discussions with Steve and with staff earlier today. We could see some merit in making those adjustments, but they're very minor in terms of the cost relative to the total cost. And so what we could do in the short term, if it's deemed that it's appropriate that those costs should be credited back to Fieldgate if they indeed front-end fund them, then we can do that through the DC credit agreement, and then we can capture those costs where they're appropriate through the other mechanisms. It was so minor in nature that it was my opinion that we not sort of try to modify the rate schedules right now and slow down the process. The other suggestions were much more significant in nature, and in our opinion, the way that we have it set out in the rate calculation is consistent with the way that the town has historically funded road improvements that have a localized benefit and are being driven by localized development needs. And so therefore it's consistent in the treatment of similar infrastructure that's been funded in the past through area rating. And we think it's appropriate, as Steve has indicated, because those needs are being driven by and benefiting the lands in the east for those development Steve may want to elaborate a little bit on that last point.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, the approach has been anytime a development comes in and has to, signalize or build a new intersection with access from either a county road or the MTO highways, has been that it's simply a condition of their approval, and there's no other contributors to it. The developer has been required to do that. So we have not in the past, front-ended or town-funded those intersections. Had we done that, we would probably still have some debt reported in the current DC, and there would be continued collections from development coming as, development, if they were town-wide charges, and we looked at it as traffic in any part of the town could go through any intersection. So instead of doing that, recognizing in fairness to the practice in the past where each development dealt with the cost of all of its improvements required on provincial highways and county roads, we've kept this as an area specific to make sure that it's fair in recognition of what developers have done elsewhere. And we'll be taking the same approach and recommending the same approach area specifically for the west side, where there's some improvements required along Highway 89 between basically the edge of downtown to Fourth Line that are growth related, and those will be dealt with through area specific charges as well.
Just one follow up on that. I think one of Fieldgate's requests was for some additional time to allow further discussions to take place with respect to the east side. But I mean, what I'm hearing from Craig and Steve, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if your advice and your recommendations aren't going to change, I'm not sure that there's really much value in extending the process, just to end up back here at a later date with you guys still offering the same advice. Am I right in that assessment or wrong?
Yes, Mayor, through you, it would be my recommendation that council consider passing all of the bylaws this evening to get those in place. I think it's really important, given the nature of the changes to the legislation and the freezing the rates at the time of applications and such, that really these are really significant capital costs that you need to have the mechanisms in place to recover them and to deal with credit agreements. And we, in our opinion, we've had a fulsome discussion and dialogue and a review of the submissions, and I think these are well canvassed issues at this point. So it would be our recommendation that that you move forward with the two bylaws that we presented to you, the rates at the public meeting, and then these adjusted ones for the east area, recognizing that we have reduced some of those costs and the allocations for recovery through the area specific. And I feel that we have a reasonable and a defensible set of bylaws to carry forward with at this time.
I agree as well. To you, Mr. Mayor, I support that recommendation.
Sorry, Wade.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that, and I thank you for raising those questions, because there were, as you know, some of the questions that I had myself. When you say, I think Craig, you made the point about at least the review of the rates or the charges are appropriate and they've been well canvassed. You indicated, and as we know, Fieldgate had submitted a letter on Friday looking for clarification or for further discussion. Has this, as Wade has now ascertained, this, I guess, firm decision with respect to not moving on the remainder of the larger ticket items, has that already been communicated to Fieldgate that that's in fact going to be the case?
Steve, I'm going to defer to you. We reviewed it over the weekend and we had a discussion this morning. And then Steve, do you want to just confirm what transpired after that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we responded to Fieldgate today to indicate that we've reviewed all of these comments and that we have fully thought it through and discussed it with Hempson. Much of it is similar and the same concerns as were raised in previous correspondence and discussed, centering really around the existing intersection of 89 and 124 and how that will be funded and what's driving the need to improve that intersection. We feel, even with these additional comments, that we've appropriately addressed that through the edits to the bylaw for the east area. There was a comment in the letter from Ms. Samardzic as well from Fieldgate, and she just indicated a question about the split between the cost allocated to their development in the 2015 study and bylaw versus the 2020 proposed bylaw, whereby in 2015, she had calculated it as 73% allocated to their site versus 87% of the costs of that area to their site in the 2020 bylaw. So we looked at that, and the apportionments and the percentage going to their site has changed because the change of use and the intensified nature of residential use on the site has resulted in a higher share of the costs. And all the other sites in the area, the development proposals for those sites are still where they were in 2015. There's still similar permitted uses in terms of commercial and other uses. And in Fieldgate's case, their site in 2015 was commercial and industrial in the official plan. But now in 2020, their site is commercial and residential, certainly changing the bulk of the site area from an industrial area, a light industrial area, which have large floor areas and minimal employment, to a residential development with over 300 homes is a more intensified use. So adding that residential split is why there's a bit higher share going towards the site than in the previous study.
So Steve, you said that a response was provided to Fieldgate today. Have you heard back from them? And I guess where I'm going with this, as you said yourself, on the spirit of fairness, I guess what I'm wondering is it? I mean, I don't certainly believe that this should be adjourned into perpetuity. Obviously, we're called upon to make a decision today, but if what you're saying is that they've since you've responded, that there has been an opportunity to have a fulsome discussion with Fieldgate for them to understand that, again, the charges are appropriate, then I'm okay with that. What I don't want to see, and what I think we all would want to avoid, is a situation where there is an appeal potentially, and there are costs that are incurred on both sides. So are you comfortable that discussion, since you've responded this morning, has been had, and there's an understanding, or at least maybe an acceptance as to the decision that you guys have made by way of the charges are appropriate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not sure if their concerns have been addressed from their viewpoint. Ms. Samardzic did reply and ask if she could be available as a participant in tonight's meeting in case there were questions. But following the procedural bylaw in terms of delegations, we did not permit that. I'm sure she's tuned in, and her consultants are probably tuned in tonight as well. We want to continue to work with Fieldgate to make sure they are appropriately credited for the work that they're front-ending, and that we make the adjustments to some of the costs through that process as those costs evolve to final construction. I can't say for sure, though, that they're satisfied with the rates for the east area in terms of their comments, because we haven't heard that, and they do retain the right to appeal. I'm hoping there won't be appeal, but that's a possibility if the bylaw is passed tonight, or if it's passed later, that's a possibility.
Okay, just my final remark, Wade. So what you're saying, Steve, is that there will be ongoing discussions to try to continue to work with Fieldgate, obviously making no promises with respect to changes by way of charges. Correct.
We will continue conversations with them to make sure costs are properly allocated through credit mechanisms when they're into the next phases of their development and making these improvements on the highways.
All right, thank you very much.
I see that Denise had her hand up.
Through the mayor, I just wanted to reinforce what both Steve and Craig have said, that certainly we understand that through a development charges process, there will always be comments, concerns, and engagement. As staff and the consultant, our job is to provide council with our best advice with respect to development charges and ensuring that the fiscal responsibilities of the town are met. And I think Steve has outlined fully, as has Craig, why the approach has been taken. I think the evolution of the plan from industrial commercial to an intensified residential is indicative of why the changes have been implemented. That said, we'll continue to work with the developer to find solutions, but certainly recognize that an appeal process is part of the process that we may be dealing with, and we'll certainly manage that accordingly. But staff is supporting the recommendations to council for these reasons, and we feel that we've done a comprehensive review of the positions that we're in, and this is a very strategic and responsive way to meet the fiscal requirements and the financial strains that in the absence of these charges going forward, that the town would be facing.
And I mean, I guess from my perspective, you know, certainly Fieldgate's an important partner, so I want to make sure that we're dealing with them fairly. But you know, if there were loose ends that still needed to be discussed, then yeah, I could see the value in continuing those discussions and postponing this. But that's why I asked, you know, Craig and Steve if they foresaw any opportunity that their recommendations would change after further discussions. And if the answer is no, then I mean, quite frankly, I don't see the sense in delaying the inevitable. But you know, if there's still an opportunity to talk about credit agreements and other accommodations that way, then I think that's probably a worthwhile thing to continue. Any other comments or questions just on the report? Okay. Seeing none, I'll ask for a mover and seconder for the motion that we receive the information packet from Hemson Consulting as presented and circulated. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that is carried. So next on the agenda, there are three separate bylaws. So the first one is the town-wide bylaw. So the motion reads, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 19-2020, being a bylaw to establish development charges for the town of Shelburne. I have a mover and seconder for that.
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Hall. Any discussion on that particular bylaw? Okay, seeing none. Jennifer, can we do a recorded vote on these three bylaws? Just for clarity's sake.
Yes, sir. Okay, a recorded vote has been requested. When I call your name, please indicate yes or no. Mayor Mills,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
Councillor Buffett. You're muted.
No.
Okay. Councillor Buffett,
Yes.
Councillor Bernardo,
Yes.
Councillor Fegan.
Yes.
Councillor Hall,
Yes.
and Councillor Wagner is absent.
Okay, so that motion is carried. Okay, the second bylaw deals with the school road area. The motion reads, be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 20-2020, being a bylaw to establish development charges for the town of Shelburne in the school road area. The mover and seconder for that one.
Move that.
Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Fegan. Any discussion on that one? Okay, seeing none. Jennifer, can we do a recorded vote as well?
Certainly. Mayor Mills,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
Councillor Bernardo,
Yes.
Councillor Buffett,
Yes.
Councillor Fegan,
Yes.
Councillor Hall,
Yes.
Councillor Wagner is absent. That motion's carried.
And finally, the East End bylaw. So this motion reads, be it resolved, leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 21-2020, being a bylaw to establish development charges for the town of Shelburne in the East Area Road Improvement Area. The mover and seconder for that one.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. Any discussion on that? Okay, Jennifer?
Okay, recorded vote. Mayor Mills,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Anderson,
Yes.
Councillor Bernardo,
Yes.
Councillor Buffett,
Yes.
Councillor Fegan,
Yes.
Councillor Hall,
Yes.
Councillor Wagner is absent. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Craig. Gone. Okay, so next we have a report from the planner regarding part lot control exemption application for Highland Village. So Steve, still with us?
Yes. I just have a couple of slides to help illustrate some of the information received with this application. Thank you, Jennifer. So I don't think this council has had an application considered for part lot control exemption previously. So just by way of a bit of an overview of what these applications are for, when a new subdivision plan is registered, for multi-unit attached dwellings, such as semi-detached and townhouse dwellings, what will normally happen is the building will be constructed in one larger block. If it's 2 units, the 2 units in the semi-detached dwelling will be built on the same property when they're first constructed to a certain point. If it's a townhouse, similarly, they'll pour the foundation for the entire building, divide up the common walls, and that entire building, even if it's got 3, 4, 5 units, will all be on one property initially. But at some point in the construction process, each lot that corresponds to the unit has to be created. So that's done through a process known as part lot control exemption. It's called that. It sounds a little bit confusing, but it's called that because the Planning Act has a section in it that requires that if you have land that's a whole lot or block in a subdivision, you can't convey or sell just one part of it. You have to sell the whole thing or convey the whole thing. So for Tribute, being the developer of the Highland Village subdivision, obviously that doesn't work to sell all 5 or 6 units in a townhouse to the same owner, and that's not how they've been selling or marketing their units. These are freehold units that will each be on their own property. So in order to create the individual lots within the blocks for the townhouse and semi-detached dwellings, they need a temporary exemption from those part lot control restrictions. So what's before you tonight in this agenda package is a bylaw that for a 2-year period would basically say these specific lots and blocks in this subdivision are not subject to the part lot control restrictions of the Planning Act. And that gives the developer then the time to actually close on the units, create the lots by reference plan so that each purchaser is buying not only their dwelling unit in the attached building, but the lot that goes around it. So in this case, the first of what will probably be 2 or 3 applications for part lot control exemption in the Highland Village subdivision is for a few townhouse lots and a few semi-detached lots in the development that are under construction currently. Next slide. So this map is the map of the entire plan, and it just highlights the units and the blocks that are subject to the current application. So in yellow, there are 10 semi-detached lots that will be broken up into 20 lots. So obviously 2 per lot. Each house has 2 units in it. And for the area shown in green, there are 3 townhouse blocks that will be broken up into 10 units. So 10 lots within those blocks. Next slide, please. So just a closer view of the reference plan for the semi-detached lots on Brook Street. So these are the smaller lots illustrated. The parts, for each lot, there are 2 parts. The larger part, so part 1 as an example, is the lot. The lot also includes part 2 for that unit. but part 2 is subject to a rear yard drainage easement. So that's why there's 2 parts illustrated on each lot, because there is a swale that will run between all of these units and the units to the west or the rear of these units, and will carry the drainage in common for all of those lots. The town will be, already has been dedicated that easement to make sure that the town has the ability to go in and remove any obstructions and basically do enforcement on the drainage swale. Okay, next slide. So these are the other 6 semi-detached lots. Again, they have rear yard easements, which are the other parts shown, as do the townhouse lots to the east. So these are on Stewart Street. These are facing north. You can see the townhouse lots are a bit smaller. And within the townhouse lots, you'll see that there's a few narrower rectangles in between certain units. That's a common corridor that the side-by-side units share, so that the owners can basically use a small sliver of their neighbor's property to access their rear yard without having to go out and around the end of the building. So one of the advantages or features of these townhouse units is that the internal units have a door out the back of the garage that allows the unit holders to go into their rear yard without having to circle around the whole building. Much more effective for maintenance and much more convenient. So we're glad to see that Tribute included that. In addition to those small rectangles, you can see there's 4 of them affecting 8 lots altogether. There are a couple of units where the back wall of the unit goes further back to the south than the neighboring unit. So in order to allow the homeowner to have access to their neighbor's property to paint or do periodic maintenance on the small part of their wall, there is a small easement where they have access to a small part, a couple of feet of their adjoining neighbor's property for that, periodic maintenance. The same approach was used in the Summerhill development on that maintenance item. In their case, they had a lot more of those small easements because there were a lot more units with staggered walls like that. Again, it's not an easement that people would likely use on a frequent basis. It would only be if there was a periodic, external repair to that specific part of the dwelling. And I think that might be the last slide, but is there one more? No. So with the part law control exemption application, there really isn't any public meeting or public consultation or even public notice requirement. There has, however, been a circulation to all of the agencies. The reason for not having any further public, comments or consultation is that this is no departure from the approved draft plan. When the subdivision was approved, it was with the understanding that these lots and blocks would be further subdivided at some point in time through part law control. So it's not changing anything in terms of the number of units in the development or the type of units, just finalizing the creation of the lots. And through the circulation, you'll see in my report, we do have a summary of the comments received. No concerns or objections raised. County planning did just raise a couple of items with respect to environmental matters, with respect to a woodlot that is to the southwest of the property. There's no impact to that woodlot as part of subdividing these lots further. The NVCA has already been previously consulted on the subdivision and has provided the necessary permits and clearances. And the NVCA has also been circulated on this application. So there are no follow-up issues. We will respond to the county to address those comments, but there's no concerns from an agency or public perspective. The bylaw is ready for 3 readings and passage tonight, but I'm happy to take any questions about that should members of council have any matters for clarification. Thank you.
Councilor Bernardo.
Always have questions because of Summerhill. I noticed up in Summerhill, they started putting up fences and whatnot in between, and you said there was an easement being able to repair some of the townhouses because of the way the walls were set up. What happens when they have a fence going straight down their side of the property, right to almost the back? And in Summerhill, even though there's a swale in the back there, some people are putting fences up even in their backyard area. What happens with that? Like, how does the neighbor, would you have to go next door, talk to your neighbor and say, can I please get on your property to do it? And if he says, no, sorry, you're out of luck, goodbye. Like, explain to me how.
Yeah, the town isn't named in those easements, the ones between unit holders. It becomes a civil matter between the two neighbors.
That's always interesting. We've had one of those here in the town on Second Avenue.
Right, and that's why the easements are put there. It's really kind of there for a worst case scenario where the two neighbors don't agree that one has a right of access for maintaining their home. The easement would put closure to that to say, yes, absolutely, that homeowner has access. And if the other homeowner has somehow infringed or obstructed that access, that the homeowner who has rights to the easement could consult their lawyer and see what actions they're allowed to take to resolve that. But we're hoping that, both with respect to fencing and where people are putting their fences and access to their easements, that the neighbors will, be talking to each other and working together on those things, so that, ultimately nobody has to go to their lawyer and access these easements through other means. But that's why they're there. They're there. And, the neighborly relations don't work out.
On the swale on the back, if they build a fence within the back area, their backyard, and we need to go into repair, do we have the ability to remove the fence?
We do, and particularly if the fence is obstructing the drainage and causing ponding or flooding on a neighbor's lot. The easement as worded doesn't prevent, the boundary fences from going in, as long as it's not going to, hit a pipe or a catch basin or something like that. And the easement allows the town then to remove those structures if they're obstructing the access required to do the maintenance. So the town has the ability to do that.
Okay.
To Councillor Bonato's point, Jennifer, refresh my memory. I know we talked about this last term of council, but I can't remember if we actually enacted a bylaw or not to allow for that sort of short-term access to a neighbor's property for maintenance reasons. I think we did, but I can't. Did you remember, Councillor Bonato?
No, I don't think we actually did, because that was the issue with Second Avenue. I'm not sure we were able to do that, were we?
I'd have to look that up. Can't recall off the top of my head.
I do remember we did have a long discussion on it because of those issues that did come up.
Yeah, and I just can't, I honestly can't remember the outcome. Okay. Any further questions for Steve? No? Okay. So the motion is, be it resolved, the council receives report P 2020-04 from the town planner as presented and circulated, and that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 18-2020, being a bylaw to designate certain land within the registered plan 7M-74 within the town of Shelburne as being exempt from part lot control. The mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Okay.
Any opposed? That's carried. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Okay, Steve.
Okay, next we have the treasurer's report regarding the March 31st financial update. Carrie, take it away.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first report is the quarterly financial report up to the end of March 31st. This report gives a summary of actuals as to where we sit, including a projection of the end of year surplus or deficit. This year's first quarter is much different than in a normal year. And it's important to note that this report is a screenshot in time. We do find ourselves in a very fluid situation, which made this report hard to prepare because the numbers change daily. To finalize this document, we actually had to force ourselves into a cutoff date and accept the fact that there will be items missing from this report. So please take that into consideration. Staff have basically revisited the adopted 2020 budget and found savings where possible by reducing or eliminating altogether some costs in order that savings could be realigned elsewhere in the budget and to help offset revenue shortfalls and increased COVID-19 related expenditures. These are all detailed before you, and as indicated in the report, it's far too soon to know what the end result of these costs will be. Many 2020 projects have been affected, and these are listed showing whether or not they are proceeding on schedule, whether they're deferred, postponed, and in some cases canceled. As you all know, we do work on a cash basis. So the money that we collect from the taxpayers annually is for the calendar year. And the majority of municipal programs and services that we offer run at a deficit. The revenues that we receive that are generated from these services are far less than the costs for running them. Some of the deficit figures that have been reported by other local lower tier government are high because they provide extensive transit services or extensive recreation services. So while our shortfall for transit does not affect us, we will actually see some recreation shortfalls through the local boards such as the arena and the library. And so any shortfalls that they may experience because of COVID-19 are not reflected in this quarterly report. One item that has changed since this report was generated is actually a good news story. And we just learned last week that the town was is a successful recipient of the Provincial Connecting Link program grant. And we have
only took 3 years to get it, right?
Yes, we have submitted applications for the past 3 years in a row for 2 projects, one being Owen Sound Street and one being for Main Street. So we have been awarded 90% funding for the Main Street project. And Jennifer has included that correspondence in the agenda package for you tonight. And the amount of the grant that we were successful in acquiring is $491,609. The remaining 10%, which is for us represents $54,624, will come from our roads construction reserve. And the town will also reapply for next year's intake for the Owen Sound Street portion once again. So also included in this report, staff have proposed the phase 2 of COVID-19 financial relief for council's consideration. So while the full municipal impact of phase 1 is not known yet, staff have considered all the other relief packages that have been provided by the federal, provincial, and county levels of government. And we've come up with a phase 2 relief plan that we believe is equitable and follows the commitments and objectives that the other levels of government we're hoping to achieve with their relief packages as well. It's also a package that is manageable for staff to carry out as far as software capabilities, and while still maintaining sustainability and cash flow. So what we are proposing is the final tax collection bylaw would normally come to council in May, so it will come to the next meeting. The only change we are proposing is that instead of August and October due dates, we are proposing to defer the due dates to be September and November. This will also align with the changes that the province and the county has made with paying our requisition for June 30th, which has been extended to September 30th. We've also suggested that the May water and sewer bill, which is due on the 29th of May, those bills went out last week. We're proposing that the due date be deferred to June 26 for those that are unable to pay, and penalty being waived. Staff have also taken the time to prepare 2 new pre-authorized payment plans for people on the water and sewer billing that they can choose, which spreads out the payments more evenly, or just makes it more manageable for those who are struggling. Those 2 additional plans were included with the water bills that went out last week as on the back of the water bill. In addition, we're just reminding residents that the dog tag license payments has been extended to the 1st of June. And we are looking for a method of being able to pay that bill online. So that is in the works. And the final thing was the local business support, which has been very successful. The mayor and that group will continue working with those businesses to determine critical needs and to facilitate reopening efforts, and that will continue to be ongoing. And then after this report was rolled out, we also had another idea that could be added to the relief plan if council wanted to entertain the idea. And I'm actually going to turn this over to the CAO to speak to, as she has had more involvement with this working group than I have. And council is agreeable, it could be added to this phase 2.
So through the mayor, staff did have a consultative session a little while ago with the sport organizations, and those groups were providing input into what their plans were for the year, whether or not they would continue, whether they might consider a condensed year or an extended season. And we understand that most would like to continue in some format. I'd suggested to the mayor that in recognition of the economic, I guess, inputs that these organizations have in our community, and that they're related to many businesses in terms of their support financially, that we might wish to extend a goodwill gesture to sport groups that are located in Shelburne, and currently we're booking some relief that could constitute possibly no rentals for fields for 2020. However, you would still be required to provide your insurance. And that might encourage these organizations to continue looking at registrations where parents might be hesitant to register, not knowing whether or not they would proceed. And with the overall expectation, similar to what the mayor has said before with rent, is that we as a town, if this relief was provided, would expect you in some format to pay it forward. And that decision on how you administer that relief would be left up to each organization. So we thought that would be important for the financial welfare of our sport organizations, and provide an ability for many, hopefully parents, to continue having active choices for their children in our community.
Do you just want to touch on the financial impact of that, Carrie?
Sure. So we had Melissa do up a tally of it for us for what the costs that the revenue loss that we've already incurred by suspending all rentals until the end of June. And that amount was approximately $5,800 or $5,900 is what we've already lost. The budgeted line item for that revenue is 16,000. So you would be looking at approximately a $16,000 revenue loss if you were to waive the fees for the entire season.
Okay, and just to give a bit of context, because our parks are closed until June 30th, of that 16, we've already basically lost, would you say 58?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's basically another 10,200 if we were to look at completely waiving the balance of fees for the regular users. When Denise and I talked about this, one of the things that came to light was, you know, if this is something we entertain, I think we make it exclusive for Shelburne organizations. You know, that there might be some attraction for you know, organizations in other communities who don't have the ability to do something like this to try to come and utilize our fields and facilities free of charge. So I think we would limit it, you know, to the regular user groups who, you know, are here year in, year out, renting those fields and facilities anyways. So why don't we have a discussion about that issue on its own, and then we can talk more generally about Carrie's report. But and any thoughts on the waiving of athletic fees?
It's Steve. I don't have, I think a full out blanket waiver, I think is worthy of some additional discussion. I would certainly, I wouldn't be opposed to offering some relief, but I think to incur a full $10,000 loss for sporting activities, not to say that it's not important, but when I compare to the needs of our community, and you know, the things that people are going without and are struggling with, I'm just not sure if taking a full 10,002 loss is what we should be doing under these circumstances. But again, to be fair and to try to accommodate and to facilitate physical activity, which I agree, I wouldn't be opposed to looking at some relief, but I think, and it, you know, again, the 10,002 might be a bit much under the circumstances.
Okay.
I guess my only concern with that is if it was strictly, because it's going to be borne by the Shelburne taxpayers, basically. And if it was strictly the Shelburne residents, children that were playing on the fields, I wouldn't have an issue with it. I'd be more inclined to go with it. But we have people coming from outside of the town that are participating in these sports as well. And that's where I don't feel it's fully fair on the Shelburne taxpayers to bear the full cost of it. And I agree with Steve. Some relief, yeah, it should be done, but all, I'm not sure.
So to that point, Carrie, how difficult would it be from an administrative point of view to say, you know, reduce them by 50%?
That would be easy to do. And the other thing that you could do is still request that the outside participants still pay their user fee.
We did that once before, and what soccer did was ended up spreading it out over everybody. So it didn't really work out. We tried that in the past because we know that they're coming from outside of the town. But soccer just turned around and said everybody pays the same fee, and they included the user fee as part of that fee. So it defeated the purpose of what we were trying to do. And the reason we did that is because if you go to the CDRC, you pay a user fee if you're coming from Mulmer because they don't participate in it. And so we felt, you know, it should be the same for baseball, should be the same for soccer, should be, you know, if you're coming from Amaranth or Mulmer and you're not part of the taxpayers paying for it, then there should be a user fee on it. But if the sports organizations are going to defeat it by just spreading it over everybody and making even the you know, the residents' children of the town pay for it, then that defeats it.
I guess the other consideration, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but you know, I don't think we can probably count on that 10,200 in being, you know, sure revenue, because if any of these organizations decide to cancel their seasons altogether, and not rent the fields, you know, the way they would in a normal year, there's no contractual obligation for them to pay anything, right?
No, we would be out that revenue regardless. Yeah.
One quick question. If the schooners, like the men's adults or the weekend tournaments, do they get it for free as well? If the weekend baseball players want to have a tournament, the men's or whatever they call it, do they get it for free as well? If we decide to go for free, or is it just strictly for the young people? That's the other question I guess I have. Because if we're going to blanket waive it for everybody, then do we give it to the ones that rent on the weekends for tournaments?
Well, yeah, and I guess that's up to us to decide. Thinking this through, I mean, my thought would be that, you know, maybe a compromised approach like that, offering, you know, half waivers would actually accomplish two things. One, I mean, it hopefully will carry on and benefit the families, you know, in some way through reduced registrations. But two, it may also incentivize some of these groups who are looking at things now and considering whether or not they just cancel the season altogether because they're looking at the high costs of the full rentals. It may incentivize them to try to salvage some of the season. And at least that way we would be recovering 50% of the regular fees that, you know, would be gone completely if they decide just to disband the whole season. Denise, did I see your hand there?
Yeah, through the mayor, in suggesting this, there was also exactly what the mayor said, a recognition, tying it back to council's strategic priorities and your values, and that you wanted to enhance recreation. With closure of parks right now, and again until the end of June, we don't know what it could be. It may not be open, but we also felt that there is direct economic ties between the sport organizations and the viability of some of the downtown businesses and the organizations that they sponsor. That this could demonstrate support for that element of the community, certainly recognizing that some of the participants are from out of town and certainly are not being are not contributing to the financial costs of the subsidy to begin with. But certainly it was just an idea. And if 100% isn't viable, then is any amount viable, as has been suggested? But it was just to have you have this discussion and allow you to provide us with direction.
I'm good with the 50%.
Councillor Fegan?
So if I understand correctly, what we're talking about is a figure of either $10,000 or potentially $5,000. Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, so $10,000 assumes that all of the organizations that normally rent our facilities will continue to do so this year and not just sort of give up on the whole season. So if all of those organizations, you know, end up renting our fields, then, you know, from June to the end of the year, we would be looking at rental revenues of 10,200 thereabouts.
Okay.
So if we offered 100% waivers off, obviously we lose that. If we reduce it by 50% and all of those user groups still continue to rent, then, you know, we're looking at 5,100, I guess.
So realistically, for me personally, I mean, for the sake of $5,000, if it incentivizes these groups to participate and actually continue to use the facilities and the fields and everything else throughout the summer, it directly results back to our objectives in trying to promote recreation. By nitpicking and really arguing for the $5,000, I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot on that incentive directly. Personally, I feel if we're going to waive anything, it should be the 100% just to incentivize people's use of the facilities and the parks.
You know, I will just chime back in and say that $5,000 is not nitpicking when you have people in the town that are paying for it. That's still a significant amount of money at the end of the day. And I think what the mayor is suggesting is that the 50% would still go a long ways in incentivizing these individuals to still look at the season as a salvageable season instead of a lost season. And so I don't mind the 50%, and I don't mind to say, as a bit of a compromise to what you're saying, Kyle, is to say, look, we'll do the 50%, but if there are extraordinary circumstances, we could sort of handle that on a case by case, rather than just simply just giving the entire barn away. So that's sort of my look at it. I know maybe $5,000 to you and I may not be a lot of money, but certainly when we're talking about the hardworking people in the town, I think $5,000 is quite a bit.
And I don't disagree, Steve. My biggest thing is that, especially considering what a lot of these organizations are going through this year in particular, and I'm speaking actually from a personal standpoint with having the judo dojo as well. I know how the sports industry is strongly affected by what's going on right now. And the idea of even a 50%, yes, it's helpful, but it may not be enough to get them out. And that's my biggest concern. So what I'm saying is that the 50% may not be as much of an incentive as we're thinking it would be. And again, do I think that 5,000 is insignificant? Absolutely not. But if we're looking at this as an incentive, then we need to look at it as an incentive, not as just, okay, so let's help a little bit. That's just my personal stance on that.
So I'll turn it around a little bit, and going back to what Steve said, at the end of next year, because of the situations that we're in, we turn around and we have shortfalls on the budgets and requirements of the town. That $5,000 may be part of a percentage increase in taxes that we are going to turn around and push onto the taxpayer of the town of Shelburne. And that's where I sort of get the concern, because they're struggling right now. A lot of the taxpayers out there are struggling right now. And then to turn around and kick them in the behind next year and say to them, sorry, buddy, we got to raise your taxes up because we gave incentives. You know, we just gave the farm away and said, here you go. We want everybody out on the field. It sounds like when Denise is talking, they're still thinking about trying to get that season going. They're not, thinking we're walking away at this point in time, if I heard correctly what was said. So 50% is still something for them. And at the same time, we're not kicking the taxpayer.
Okay, can we throw that back to Denise? Denise, have you had any feedback from these organizations? Do you have a sense on what their thoughts are?
Through the mayor, we know that one organization has canceled their season, and that's the Junior Schooners. The other organizations are waiting for direction with respect to the province. Right now, as the mayor has mentioned, that all field use is canceled till the end of June. We do know that some are trying to regroup, but their financial ability is also in question. And a lot of the reservation that comes from the parent who doesn't know, do I register my child while I'm struggling financially as well when the season may not proceed? So again, I apologize. This was not meant to consume a lot of time from council because you had no pre-warning of this. It was simply to recognize that sport is a critical component of our service levels. They have an economic impact to local business as well. And potentially it could be part of the relief program that's extended similar to all taxpayers, as well as businesses that you were considering. But certainly if you need more information to make a comprehensive assessment of this, we certainly can bring something back at a later date to not allow you to struggle with this without any pre-staff report. And I apologize for that, but I certainly just wanted to get it on the table for you.
No, and that's fine. And I think actually that's a good point. I mean, keeping in mind that nobody can really do anything until the end of June anyways. We do have some time. So why don't we give it all some thought? I see Jennifer had her hand up too. She had a comment. So.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to let you know that I had participated in the discussion we had with the sports organizations last Monday. And the general nature of the discussion was the lack of registrations and the ability to pay the registration amounts. So most of the organizations would still like parents to register and are offering them a delayed payment process or some type of payment plan. But that is the general nature of the discussion was the ability to make payments at the moment.
So the hope would be, as Denise said in her earlier comments, you know, the hope would be that whatever relief we offer to these organizations would then be passed along to the end users in the form of reduced registration costs. You know, I guess landing on the right amount is the tricky part here. So why don't we give it all some thought? And maybe we can look at that at the next meeting. And then I guess, you know, the second question to consider that Councillor Bernardo raised, which is a good one, is, you know, whether any relief, regardless of the quantum, whether it's applied universally to all of the user groups, including adult groups, or whether we, you know, specify that this is only really intended for the junior athletic programs. So those are the two things I would suggest we kind of wrestle with in our own minds, and then we can revisit that at the next meeting. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
All right, Carrie, sorry,
And it,
didn't mean to
sorry.
hijack the report.
That's okay. It could also be part of phase 3 relief plan that would come out in June.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should move ahead with the balance of phase 2 that you've set out here tonight, and I mean that could even be a standalone that's added on. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments with respect to the rest of Carrie's presentation?
Yeah, I have a question, Wade, if you don't mind. Carrie, I know that the comment about the connecting link drew quite a bit of laughter from Councilor Bernardo, and probably rightfully so. I just, out of curiosity, I just want to know, was anything done differently in this application round where we were able to get it? Was it additional information? Was it followed up by phone calls this time around? Some takeaways that we could probably learn from this application, or was it basically just the same as usual, and it was just a stroke of luck this time that we got it?
I don't think we did anything different. Do you, Jim? No.
No, it was pretty well the standard procedures that we followed for at least for the last couple of years since I've been around anyway. So it's just luck of the draw really. And the time on the list, we've been told that there is quite a waiting list for this. So only so many municipalities receive it. So it does take a number of years on there to more or less prove yourself out. So.
Denise?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Through the mayor, I did send the AMO information, and embedded in there was the link. So we were one of 24 municipalities in Ontario that received funding this round. And we will apply for Owen Sound next year. So it wasn't a long list. There were some municipalities that received significant money in the $3 million range. There were some that received under 60,000. So we received just under $500,000. Of the two projects, this was the lower cost of the two initiatives. So hopefully next year when we apply for Owen Sound, we'll be successful. Again.
I suspect we had some advocacy at the provincial level as well, Steve. Sylvia Jones had sent me an early morning text last week when she first learned of this before it was made public, just to share the good news. So I think she was certainly on top of it, and you know, use whatever influence she had as well, I'm sure.
Are we going to be able to fix some of the internal roads this year rather than fixing Owen Sound and Main Street?
We have our regular OCIF funding, which is 260,000 this year. The internal streets will be looked at for that, and we are completing our roads and sidewalk needs study so that we can determine which of those roads will be spent on that funding.
Because that was going to be in my council inquiries, if I could, since you brought it up, Carrie. When is that study coming, Jim?
Through your worship, I was in contact with SBA last week. They're putting the finishing touches on that, and they hope to have that to us within the next few weeks. Product.
And you sent me an email saying that the Canfield walkway and another walkway was not part of that study. Is it now part of that study?
I wasn't too sure that it was on there, but it is included in this one.
Okay.
The ones that were missing, asset management program, the connecting between some of the connecting pathways, I guess you'd say, similar to Canfield. They were missing in our asset management program, but I don't think they were missing in the roads needs study. That was just, they weren't transferred over from the original program. So Dad caught those and now they're included, so.
I'd be interested to see that when it does come out.
Okay, any final comments or questions for Carrie?
One final, the AMO conference, and I noticed within your report, I noticed within the report that staff has canceled all their conferences. And I know AMO, they're doing it virtual, but in all honesty, on my part, and I mentioned this to Jennifer, if staff's willing to cancel their conferences and get their money back, for me, I think it's pretty well the same thing. Just for the town to save some money. I know the hotel, we're getting the money back for that, but if we can get the money back for the conference, I think that'll save a little bit of money, at least for the town.
Thank you. All right. So the motion we have is amended slightly from that which was in the agenda package, and there's just an additional paragraph that's been added to it. So as Carrie had mentioned, the county has deferred the due dates for their remittance payments for our taxes, or for their portion of taxes that we collect for them. But as sort of a technical aspect, we have to essentially endorse that decision on the part of county to allow that. So there's an extra provision in the draft resolution here. So the resolution reads as follows: be it resolved, the council receives report FS 2020-05 from the treasurer with respect to the March 31st, 2020 financial update, and that staff prepare an amendment to the interim 2020 tax collection bylaw number 67-2019, deferring the tax due date from May 21st, 2020 to June 19th, 2020, as approved in phase 1 of the COVID-19 financial relief plan. And that staff be directed to bring back a 2020 final billing tax collection bylaw, setting the final due dates to be September 17th, 2020 and November 19th, 2020, changed from traditionally August and October due dates. And further, that as per section 311 subsection 15 of the Municipal Act, the town of Shelburne supports the amended County of Dufferin 2020 property tax payment schedule to coincide with the education payment dates, deferring the June and September payments by 90 days. And that council approves phase 2 of the COVID-19 financial relief plan as presented in Appendix 6 of report FS 2020-05. The mover and seconder for that.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Carrie, you're up again for a report on the municipal grant funding.
Yes. So I sent out an email to all the grant recipients because we had forwarded their money to them in late February, early March, before all this happened. We wanted to reach out to all of them to find out what their planned event was going to be doing going forward. And I asked them all to give us an update if they were able. Some of them haven't made a decision yet. For example, the fall fair, they've set their deadline is June 1st to decide whether or not they will go proceed with the fair running or not. And of course, the Santa Claus parade, it's too far out to make a decision yet. most of the respondents have indicated that they've either spent some or all of the grant money. Some of it's tied up in deposits, and because their event may not be happening this year and has been postponed to next year, they're going to keep those deposits where they are and have just rescheduled the date. So our staff recommendation is just to receive the report tonight at this time. But I did want just to update council on where everything stands. I do have one verbal update from the Highlands Youth for Christ. The door, I had indicated that the check had been returned by Canada Post. So what happened there is we mailed the check to the Shelburne location, but they don't receive mail there. It goes to their head office in Orangeville. So we will read the check. And they've indicated that they are still paying rent at the Shelburne location. And they also continue to keep the Wi-Fi on. So even though the location is closed, the youth are able to sit on the front steps and access the Wi-Fi. And they also have created a youth crisis line, which is has been set up for audio and text messages, so that they're able to reach out to the youth. And she's actually going to be sending me a flyer so that we can promote that information for them. So basically their payment has been spent on the rent as well. And other than that, unless there's any questions.
I have a question, Carrie, Wade, if that's possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. So my question is this, Carrie, maybe this is for the group as a whole. For those who have received funding, as you indicated, some have spent the money, some have put it into deposits to use for an event scheduled down the road, potentially next year, as you mentioned. For those who step forward and say that the money that they receive, they would like to use it to help in the community relief assistance. So for example, they received, whether it be $100, $300, and as an organization, they've decided to pivot, and instead of, because they can't carry on with the event, but decided to use the money in the benefit of the community relief effort. So again, whether it's securing sanitizers or masks for frontline workers, residents, etc. Would that be acceptable, although not originally intended, obviously, at the time that the money was granted?
And that would be a council decision. So that's why staff did not make a recommendation for that. If council wishes to add to this motion, to receive the report and further that, any unspent grant funds be utilized for COVID-19 relief efforts, then that's a council decision, and there's nothing wrong with that. When they fill out their financial report for if they reapply in 2021, they would just indicate on their report that that's where they spent those funds.
Okay, so then I would like to bring add to the report and bring that motion, allowing organizations, as long as they could provide evidence or an outline, and then therefore proof, of course, of what they did to assist in the COVID-19 relief within the community, of course, that we allow these organizations to do that with those conditions.
So sorry, Steve, you're amending the motion to,
I said we don't have a motion at all yet on the floor, but yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. He's sort of trying to amend a motion.
No, I guess what I was saying, and I apologize. What I wanted to do is I wanted to add, I guess, to the report. I think what Carrie was saying is that there's nothing wrong with adding that as a component to the report. So in essence, that's what I'm doing. So if I misspoke earlier, then I apologize. But that's the intention.
Doesn't it have to be a motion though?
Well, this is what I'm saying. That's what
that would have to be a council motion though, would it not, to change
So,
Well,
here's where we're at. The draft motion included in the agenda basically just receives the report and indicates no further action will be taken. Because we're not instructing any of these grant recipients to return funds, I think to Carrie's point, you know, if they wanted to expend some or all of that money that we allocated to them for COVID relief within the community, then those efforts would be indicated on their financial report next year when we look at this. And I think that accomplishes a couple of things. One is, you know, for some of the groups who have already laid out, you know, resources for deposits and whatnot for events that are just going to come later, then I think we would have to take that into account next year when they're applying for monies, you know, to make sure that they're not double dipping. But, you know, for those groups, Steve, that may come forward and say, look, you know, we used half of the grant money to, you know, purchase PPE to use in the community, then I think, you know, that's a judgment call we make next year and at grant funding time to say, okay, you know, that was an appropriate use of money, so we won't sort of knock that against you in terms of assessing next year's allocation.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but what it sounded to me from what Carrie was saying is that she would need, and if I'm not correct in saying this, but she would need direction. So, for example, if I was running an organization and I called Carrie tomorrow or yesterday, and I said, hey, listen, this is what I want to do, I would have assumed Carrie would have said, well, I don't know, that's something that council would have to direct because that wasn't the intended purpose of what we gave you the funds. So it seems to me that there needs to be some direction. And if it's simple as we don't need to bring a formal motion, we're just simply telling her that if somebody decides to do that, we're okay. If they call, then that's great. But if not, then it would appear to me that it would require some action on our behalf.
I think we can direct as council, can we not? Direct staff?
Would you prefer an amendment to that draft motion, Carrie?
It might make things cleaner because there are a couple of them that have asked if there is any way that they could help. So if I was able to respond to them with a motion stating that, you know, it's an initiative that is, you know, helping the community in that respect, then they would probably feel more comfortable spending the money that way.
So there's an
Through the
action.
mayor, through the mayor and to the deputy mayor's point, staff would prefer that you give us the direction so that the transparency and accountability and that you're being very prescriptive, that it's COVID-19 related so that there's no ambiguity on what you're permitting for the use of funds that are being reallocated.
And just to further add to that, that it's COVID relief efforts, obviously within the town of Shelburne, and that they're able to provide us with an outline, whether that's at the end of the year or after the efforts are made to the town or however we decide. But I don't want it to be PPEs that are going to be shipped outside of the town partially and some within the town.
You also wanted receipts as part of your financial report. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely.
Are there any other thoughts or comments? Okay, so let me sort of read through this and I'll add a provision in, Steve, and see if it's to your liking. Be it resolved, the council receives report FS 2020-06 from the treasurer with respect to the 2020 municipal grant funding and COVID-19 implications, and that grant funding recipients shall be free to use portions of their grant monies for COVID-19 related relief expenditures within the community, and that no further action is necessary at this time.
Yeah, I would probably remove the word portion because I'm not really sure what that means. That's suggesting if I have 500, somehow I may be only limited to be using 300.
Yeah. Were you able to get that, Jennifer?
Review that one more time, please, Mr. Mayor.
And that grant funding recipients may use the grant monies that they've received for COVID-19 related relief expenditures within the town of Shelburne. And then I may just add there too that so long as such expenditures are properly recorded on
Yeah,
the financial report.
I agree with that.
I like that better. You said community the first time, and I was thinking community can mean anything beyond even Shelburne borders. It's still community.
Yeah. Is everybody clear on that then? Okay.
I like that.
Mover and seconder for that.
Move it, Steve.
I'll move it. Thank you.
Okay. Moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Fegan. I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, hands up, sure.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's carried. Okay. And Carrie, you're up once more for the water financial plan.
Okay, this one is a little bit of a housekeeping issue. When we did the water rate study in 2017, it was followed by a water financial plan, which is attached in this agenda package. It was when we received that financial plan that we realized all the changes that had happened in water and sewer financially that needed the water rate updated. So we proceeded with the water rate update, which council just passed in February. And we neglected to get the financial plan passed. It is a requirement of the permit to take water that we provide the ministry with a current copy of our water financial plan. So even though it is outdated, it still does refer to the 2017 water rate study, which is amended. But as a housekeeping issue, if we want our permit to take water renewed, which expires in June, we need to adopt this financial plan. And that's making a long story short.
Any questions for Carrie on that?
After we adopt this plan, do we have to amend it after June
No,
to reflect current, more current?
no, because it does refer to the 2017 water rate study, and we've passed a bylaw that replaces the schedule on that study to amend the rates for 2020 and up to 2025. And if you'll remember when Watson provided us with the water rate update, they did advise that we should do another full study within the next 5 years. So that's when we would incorporate the financial plan into that as well. And I'm not sure, Jim, how many years is our permit to take water good for? No?
Your worship, the permit to take water they're usually good for 10 years. So ours is up May 31st. That's our last official day. And June 1st, it would be the date that we do need the renewal. So the renewal is underway, but as part of that renewal, that's where we found that we needed the council resolution to say that we've adopted that financial plan just as a technicality. So we don't have an issue with still getting that permit before then. We say it's well underway, but this is just one point that jumped out that we do need that resolution. So.
Okay.
And the water rate study that the bylaw that we have passed, it goes up to 2025. So we will be doing another full water rate study, including a financial plan, long before the permit to take water expires. Second time.
All right, so it's a rather lengthy resolution Be it resolved, the council received report FS 2020-07 from the treasurer with respect to the water financial plan and Water Ontario Regulation 453/07, and that the Town of Shelburne Water Financial Plan prepared by Watson and Associates Economists Limited dated January 23rd, 2019 be approved, and that notice of availability of the financial plan be advertised on the town's website, and that the financial plan and the council resolution approving the financial plan be submitted to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and that the financial plan and the council resolution approving the financial plan be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, satisfying the requirements under the Safe Water Drinking Act. Mover and seconder for that.
I'll move it.
Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Buffett. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, on to communications. Are there any items under that list that anybody would like to deal with or discuss? No? Okay. Motion be it resolved, the council receives items under 10.0 communications for information. Moved by Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Council inquiries. You got a couple out already?
Me.
Walter got a head start already.
Not quite one or two in there. I think I had one more though. Oh, sidewalk cleaning. Are we still cleaning the sidewalks, the sand off them? Jim?
Oh, there we go. Through your worship, yes, that was underway. I know the guys have had to go out a number of times to sand again, just with winter holding on the way it is. But yes, they're still cleaning those. So.
And the final inquiry, because I get hit by a couple of people every time, is the roads. We're going to sweep the roads again. I'm figuring at some point in time, right?
Through your worship, yes. Our contractor came in and did the initial round, and then he's not sure exactly what his time frame is, but in the next little bit, I believe he's in Grand Valley right now. When he's done there, he's back to us and finish us up on our good round and cleaned up. So,
thank you.
Any other inquiries?
I'm gonna use Mayor Mills, if I may, just to use the council inquiries just to make a couple of remarks. One, obviously everybody around the table is doing their best to assist the community during this difficult time. I do want to highlight two individuals, that being Councillor Shane Hall for making the PPEs available so that we were able to secure that to assist our frontline workers. So I want to say special thanks to you, Shane, for organizing that. I can assure you, as you know, that went to good use. And lastly, I want to thank, and I know I probably did this in the last meeting, but it's worth repeating. I want to thank Mayor Mills for his tremendous leadership, day after day, seemingly making these reports, being transparent, yet striking the right balance between providing facts and being compassionate at the same time. We know what happened at the Shelburne residence, and I thought that his ability to show leadership during that very difficult time was really well received by the community as a whole. So I just want to thank you. It's not an easy job to do, being in the forefront like that. And so I want to commend you for demonstrating what leadership really should look like in a time of crisis.
Appreciate that. On that point, the deputy mayor and I received an update sort of very late in the day on Friday from Headwaters. So I mean, some good news out of Shelburne residents. I mean, they're certainly not out of the woods by any means yet, but there currently are 35 residents still within the facility on the nursing side, and 15 have moved to that resolved column. So, you know, there certainly is some progress being made, and you know, a significant number are recovering from this, which is good. I believe, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that report also indicated that 3 residents are currently outside of the facility. They're in Headwaters right now, and I think 2 of the 3 were positive. And there were an additional 2 residents who had been sent home on a temporary basis, 1 positive, 1 not. And I mean, there's still a ways to go here. Some of the residents I think are still in fairly serious condition. But it is encouraging at least to see, a number as high as 15 on the recovery side. So thanks, Steve, for those kind words. I mean, it's just trying to do what we can here. But I have a couple of quick comments. Denise, could you give us an update as to where things are at with the OPP costing process?
Certainly through the mayor. As of today, I'm still waiting to hear from the OPP, and this assumes that we would be back to regular meetings in June if they would attend to present the costing proposal. However, they did confirm today that they will consider an electronic format such as Zoom, but they need to just have that discussion with their colleagues. And certainly the process that was outlined in the prior staff report would then be reinitiated. So I'm hoping to hear next week what the potential dates might be. And just to confirm, because we have had questions, that council has 6 months from the date of the presentation by the OPP to make a decision. I guess I could note right now, even though it will be covered in the staff report on the next agenda for council, that due to social distancing, Jennifer has been reviewing space rental at the CDRC for all council meetings going forward once we return to in-person formats. So obviously, if the OPP is presenting in person, we'll certainly be using that venue as well for any sessions with them.
Okay. And then just one final point. I think everybody's received the notice of the special meeting this coming Wednesday at 5. Just to give a very brief heads up as to what that is. So over the last few days, staff and I have been working on what really is a very high level blueprint for recovery moving forward. I mean, to this point, at least, we've sort of been dealing with crisis management, and I think it's important that we begin to set out a framework as to what our efforts are going to look like moving beyond the immediate crisis. Again, this blueprint that we'll talk about Wednesday and hopefully approve in either in its current form or in any amended form that we come up with. I mean, certainly it will be backed up by further staff reports that deal with the details and all the substantive elements. But what this is intended to do is just from a policy point of view, kind of point the direction that we would like to see our recovery efforts take, and then hopefully that will give staff some guidance when they're developing their more substantive policies and procedures. So that will be Wednesday at 5, right, Jennifer? Okay. And I mean, to be honest, I don't anticipate it's going to take very long at all. It's a relatively short document. We'll get that out tomorrow so that everybody has some time to look at it in advance of Wednesday. Okay, any other inquiries? No, everybody's good? No, Linda?
No.
I thought you were doing a headstand.
I was.
All right, so that brings us to the confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 22-2020, being a bylaw to confirm certain proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Shelburne for its special council meeting held May the 11th, 2020. Moved by Councillor Fegan, seconded by Councillor Hall. All in favor? Carried. And finally, be it resolved that we now adjourn to meet at the call of the mayor. Moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Donato. All in favor? Carried. All right. Thanks, guys.
All righty.
We'll see everybody Wednesday.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right, be well.
All right, bye.
Wait, before you sign off, can you give me a shout when you have an opportunity?